I wasn't supposed to be here. Not in this building, not in his world, and definitely not in his life. But the day I walked into that conference room with a stack of forgotten sketches, everything shifted. Dominic Cross, youngest CEO in fashion history, cold as ice, untouchable. I was just the unpaid intern from the Bronx, invisible, replaceable, or so I thought, until his brother leaned back in his chair, grinning, and dared him. Take the next woman who walks through that door to the gala. And guess who walked in? Yeah, me. That I wish I could tell you I handled it gracefully, but I froze, clutching those sketches like they were armor. Dominic didn't blink. You'll do, he said, like it was already decided. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Fast forward a week, and I'm standing outside Elise's boutique, staring at a price tag bigger than my rent. They'd sent me for a fitting, Dominic's orders, and I almost walked away. But Elise herself pulled me in, handed me an emerald green gown, and when I saw myself in the mirror, I barely recognized the girl staring back. Still, I told myself this was just business. One night. Smile, survive, and stay invisible. I was wrong. The night of the winter gala, the city lights glittered like scattered diamonds. Dominic was waiting for me at his penthouse, tuxedo sharp, unreadable as ever. When he turned and saw me, though, his expression cracked just enough for one word to slip out. Perfect. I should have looked away, should have kept my guard up, but something in his voice, soft, almost surprised, hit me harder than it should have. That we arrived at the gala, cameras flashing, whispers swirling. Who is she? Why her? Dominic leaned down, murmuring, just brief. Easy for him to say. Inside, the ballroom glowed with chandeliers and champagne and faces I'd only ever seen on magazine covers. And then, like a scene written to ruin me, Vanessa Morgan walked in, the infamous ex. The one who'd betrayed him and nearly destroyed the company. She didn't even look at me when she smiled. An intern, she purred. How quaint. I wanted to disappear. Instead, I smiled back. Actually, I designed the winter necklines, I said, steady, quiet. Her smile faltered just enough to taste victory. One small one, anyway, but it didn't last, because then came Sophia Reeves, Dominic's ex-fiancée. Perfect, poised, and exactly the kind of woman his father, Richard Cross, wanted for him. Turns out Richard had invited her, hoping to shove me out of the picture without even saying a word. And for a moment, watching them together, the cameras flashing, the board members whispering, I believed it. I believed maybe I didn't belong here after all. That I slipped out to the balcony for air, but Richard found me first. He didn't even bother pretending to like me. Instead, he warned me about the upcoming board vote, told me I was ruining Dominic's chances of staying CEO. And then, almost like he was doing me a favor, he said it. If you care about him, walk away. I laughed, shaky but real. You don't scare me. I wish that had been the end of it. The next day, Dominic offered me a real job. Not as his date, not as a pawn. A junior designer role, salary, benefits, my name on projects. He'd reviewed my work, my sketches, my ideas, and for the first time, someone with real power actually saw me. But Richard wasn't done. 2 nights later, he waited outside my grandmother's apartment in a black-town car, windows sliding down like a movie villain reveal. He offered me $5 million to disappear from Dominic's life. $5 million. That I told him where he could shove his check. Dominic was furious when I told him, but not surprised. He's trying to buy the life he wants for me, he said. I won't let him. Then came the twist neither of us saw coming. Vanessa. She called me one night, asked to meet. Against my better judgment, I went. She ordered a martini, leaned across the table, and said, Richard's framing Dominic for embezzlement. I laughed. I actually laughed out loud. But she slid the papers across the table, forged transfers, fake signatures, falsified accounts, and suddenly it wasn't funny anymore. She wanted something in exchange for helping us, head of international marketing. After everything she'd done, I wanted to throw my drink in her face. But she had proof we couldn't afford to ignore. So we made a deal. Sort of. 2 weeks later, the board meeting felt like walking into a war zone. 20 members. Richard on one side, Dominic on the other. I waited outside, hands shaking. Richard went first, presenting his evidence. a neat little packet painting Dominic as a thief. Gasps rippled around the table, murmurs rising. Richard's smirk said he thought he'd won. Then Dominic stood, calm and deliberate, and projected the real records onto the screen, certified by independent auditors just that morning. The documents my father presented, he said evenly, were falsified. By him. The room exploded. James distributed folders, showing the offshore accounts, the bribes to board members, the emails between Richard and Vanessa plotting Dominic's takedown. And right on cue, Vanessa walked in, heels clicking like gunfire. "It's true," she told them. "I recorded everything." Silence. Shock. Then Elalina Winters, head of the board, stood and said the words I'll never forget. Effective immediately, Richard Cross is permanently removed from King and Cross. Just like that, it was over. 6 months later, the company was thriving. Dominic rebuilt the board with fresh talent. My designs, the ones I'd stayed up sketching at 2 in the morning, walked the runway at Fashion Week. I'd been promoted to head designer for our sustainable line. James started his own boutique marketing firm. Eloise and my mom, Diana, finally began mending old wounds, though her illness meant we were running out of time. And Vanessa? She leveraged her little act of redemption into a top role at a competing fashion house. Typical AS for Dominic and me. One crisp autumn night, he brought me to the rooftop garden of his penthouse. The city glowed beneath us, endless and alive. He handed me a small box. Inside was a key. "It's for the Mitchell Design Initiative," he said softly. "A foundation for scholarships and paid internships for kids like you who couldn't afford fashion school." I couldn't even speak. But Dominic wasn't finished. He knelt down, velvet box in hand, the same deep green as that first gala dress. "Raina Mitchell," he said, steady and certain. "You walked into my life carrying forgotten sketches, and you changed everything. Will you marry me?" I didn't hesitate. Yes. And yet, even standing there, holding the man I loved, I couldn't shake the feeling that Richard Cross wasn't done with us. That someone like him doesn't lose quietly. That Vanessa, wherever she landed, wasn't finished playing her games either. Maybe the real fight wasn't over. But for tonight, under those city lights, it didn't matter, because sometimes the intern who walks in changes everything. I thought the war was over the night Dominic slid that emerald ring onto my finger. I thought we'd survived Richard's schemes, Vanessa's betrayal, the board's politics. I thought we'd finally earned our peace. I was wrong. 2 weeks after the proposal, the first sign came quietly, a headline buried on page 6 of a fashion blog. Ex-King and Cross CFO accuses company of fraud. At first, Dominic brushed it off. "Clickbait," he said, tossing the tablet aside. But the next day, 3 more articles dropped. Then 5. Then it went global. By Friday, King and Cross stock had dipped 8%. Investors were panicking, the board was restless, and whispers started flying that Dominic had made reckless changes to the company structure. All lies, carefully planted that I didn't have to ask who was behind it. That night, we were in Dominic's penthouse. The city sprawled beneath us like a restless ocean. James paced near the window, muttering curses under his breath, while Dominic sat perfectly still, jaw tight, staring at the reports. "Vanessa," James said finally, breaking the silence. "It has to be her." Dominic didn't look up. "No, this isn't Vanessa's style. She plays for leverage, not destruction." I hesitated before speaking. "Then it's Richard." Dominic's hand stilled on the table. For a moment, there was only the hum of the city outside. "My father doesn't just want me out of the company," he said finally. "He wants the company burned to the ground, if he can't control it." That was when Victoria, Dominic's assistant, walked in, her usually composed face pale. "Sir, you need to see this." She handed him her tablet. It wasn't just fraud allegations anymore. Someone had leaked Dominic's private emails. One's twisted out of context to make it look like he was hiding losses, manipulating investors, stealing from his own company. They wanted him ruined. 2 days later, King and Cross headquarters turned into a war zone. Reporters camped outside the glass doors, flashing cameras like gunfire. Employees whispered in hallways. And somewhere deep inside the chaos, I started to feel it. That slow, creeping doubt. Was I the reason this was happening? I overheard two junior designers outside the studio whispering. It all started when he brought her in. They didn't know I was there. I didn't correct them by the time I got home that night. Eloise was waiting at the kitchen table, arms crossed, eyes sharp as ever. "You're thinking of running again," she said simply. I sighed, sitting down across from her. "If staying means ruining him, what choice do I have?" Eloise leaned forward, taking my hand. "Listen to me, Reina. That man has built a life fighting for things that matter to him. Don't you dare decide for him what's worth the fight." Her voice broke something open in me. She was right. Dominic didn't need me gone. He needed me on his side. The next morning, Vanessa called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me knew better. "You're welcome," she said, her voice silky, smug. "For what?" I asked. "For not being the one tearing your boyfriend apart right now." I bit back my anger. "Then who is?" She hesitated, just long enough to confirm what I'd feared. "Richard's working with someone new," she said finally. "A ghost." "A ghost? That's what people call him," Vanessa explained. "Real name's Marcus Vey. Ex-Wall Street shark turned corporate saboteur. Companies hire him to break competitors from the inside out. He buries CEOs. Richard brought him in months ago, and Dominic has no idea what's coming." My blood ran cold. That night, I told Dominic everything. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked rattled. "I knew my father would fight dirty," he said quietly. "But Marcus Vey? That's another level." James leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Then we fight back harder." Dominic shook his head. "No, we get smarter. Marcus doesn't leave fingerprints. If we go after him without proof, we lose everything." He turned to me, his gaze steady. "Reina, I need you to trust me on this." I nodded, but something inside me whispered that trust wouldn't be enough. A week later, Marcus made his move. An anonymous source leaked evidence of unpaid taxes tied to King and Cross's new sustainability division, my division. Within hours, hashtags trended worldwide. Investors pulled funding, and the board called an emergency meeting. And this time, Dominic wasn't sure he'd win. "You don't have to take the fall for me," I told him, pacing the penthouse. "If you fire me, they can't use me against you." "Stop," he said sharply, rising to his feet. "Don't you ever suggest that again. You're not leaving, Reina. Not now. Not ever." Something broke in his voice when he said it, something that made me realize he wasn't just fighting for the company anymore. He was fighting for us. The night before the board meeting, Dominic received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single photograph, Marcus Vey shaking hands with Richard Cross, and a note that said only, "Walk away, or we'll bury her." That was the moment I understood exactly how far this would go. The boardroom was silent the next morning, tension thick enough to taste. Richard sat smugly at the far end, Marcus leaning casually against the wall behind him like a shadow no one acknowledged but everyone feared. Dominic presented his case calmly, methodically dismantling the fraud allegations, exposing Marcus's shell companies, tracing offshore accounts back to Richard's name. Every fact, every receipt, every timestamp. But Richard wasn't done. "You expect them to believe her designs didn't cost us millions?" he sneered, gesturing toward me. "An intern from the Bronx suddenly running our most profitable line? Come on, Dominic. Even you don't believe that." Before Dominic could respond, I stood. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "I don't care what you believe," I said, locking eyes with Richard. "I know my worth. And so does your son." For the first time since I'd met him, Richard Cross had no comeback. In the end, the board sided with Dominic. Barely. Marcus disappeared the next day, wiped clean like he'd never existed. But we knew better. We knew this wasn't over. That night, standing on the penthouse balcony, the city lights stretching endlessly below, Dominic wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "They're coming for us again." I leaned into him, my heart pounding. Then let them. Because this time, I wasn't the intern who stumbled into his world by accident. This time, I was ready to fight for it.